Okay, so let's begin our discussion on PN junction. So we have already discussed the PN junction, the fabrication of the PN junction, then the equilibrium, non-equilibrium, and then we derive the current voltage equation using MCD, minority carrier diffusion equation, and charge control model. Both of them gives basically same equation. And then we also discussed real diode. What are the different regions for deviation, such as you have breakdown. You have this breakdown region, then your generation current, then your recombination current, then your ideal region, then you have high level injection, then you have effect of series resistance, right? So that basically gives your IV characteristic, right, of a diode. Now let us take a short detour. What will happen if we increase the band gap? If we increase the band gap, how it will affect the performance of PN junction diode, this IV characteristic. So if you increase the band gap, how different parameters will change? What about intrinsic carrier concentration? If band gap is increased, intrinsic carrier concentration will decrease, right? And what about reverse saturation current? You can recall the expression for reverse saturation current. It is proportional to Ni square by doping, like that, right? So this will also decrease. So if you want to have less reverse bias current, we will prefer a bigger band gap material, right? That means you can operate it at high temperature. But what will be the disadvantage? If you increase the band gap, what about VBI? VBI is KT by Q log NA and D by Ni square, right? So VBI, what will happen to VBI? It will increase or decrease? If you increase the band gap, the built-in potential will increase or decrease? Come on.
Increase.
Increase. Very good. Because Ni will decrease. So your built-in potential will increase if you increase the band gap, and you can also understand, right, for P type and N type, right? So let's say the Fermi level is somewhere here, Fermi level somewhere here, right? So it will go like this, right? So this built-in potential will be, of course, more. And okay, there is a one term called contact potential. We will discuss later on. Right now we are not, but contact potential will also increase basically. Okay. What is the effect of doping concentration? Let's say if you decrease the doping concentration, what will happen? Your built-in potential will decrease, right? If you decrease the doping, your built-in potential will decrease, right? And what about the series resistance that we saw here? Will also decrease, right? Now this plays a role in case of breakdown, right? When there is a breakdown, right? Now we have discussed two types of breakdown, right? Avalanche breakdown and Zener breakdown, right? In lab, you have seen Zener diodes, right? Now they work on which mechanism? Avalanche breakdown or Zener breakdown?
Zener
In
breakdown.
basic electronics lab, we have used Zener diodes, right? So they work on which mechanism? Avalanche or Zener breakdown?
सर दोनों हो जाते हैं उसमें,
Huh?
दोनों तरीके के ब्रेकडाउन पॉसिबल हैं.
So you are saying that both the breakdowns are possible, right? But how will you identify the breakdown is due to which mechanism?
सर जल्दी हो जाता है तो यूजुअली जीनर होता है, थोड़ा लेट होता है तो एवलांच.
Even avalanche breakdown can happen at a smaller voltage. That is possible.
सर अगर
Sir, by
इंट्रिंसिक
2P.
कैरियर कंसंट्रेशन ज्यादा होती है तो
No, that is design consideration, but it is not stopping from the avalanche breakdown to occur, right? See, if you apply high enough voltage, they can accelerate and knock out. What is the fundamental difference between Zener breakdown and avalanche breakdown?
After
Doping.
avalanche breakdown, the diode is destroyed. We cannot use it further.
Not exactly. Diode is destroyed when current is very high. Okay, because these breakdown mechanisms are used. Okay, and these breakdown mechanisms are used to control the current. See, for Zener diode is there, right? It actually uses, it can use Zener breakdown, of course, and it also uses avalanche breakdown. So the name is just coming as part of history, but breakdown mechanism can be either of them. Usually the breakdown mechanisms is avalanche breakdown if you go above few volt, and the Zener breakdown is usually applicable at lower voltages. But if you see the fundamental difference between these two mechanisms, in avalanche, what is happening? These carriers are getting energy and hitting the crystal somewhere and creating electron hole pair, right? So they are basically hitting these electrons here, which are kind of bound and creating electron hole pair, right? Now they will hit when they are accelerated for a certain time, right? That time is basically collision time, mean collision time, right? Mean collision time, right? Now, if you increase the temperature, what will happen? Mean collision time will increase or decrease? If you increase the temperature, what will happen to the mean collision time? The time between two collisions?
Decrease.
Decrease,
right? That means now this electron or hole has less time to get accelerated or to acquire that energy. So you will need more voltage, right? Right? So that means the breakdown voltage will increase as you increase the temperature. So this is basically called positive temperature coefficient. Correct? In case of Zener breakdown, what is the mechanism? The field itself is pulling out the electrons. You understand? The field itself is pulling out the electrons from the valence band to conduction band. So if you increase the temperature, now it is easier to pull out the electron from the valence band, or it is difficult? You can understand this way. We discuss how the band gap changes with temperature. If you increase the temperature, band gap increases or decreases? If you increase the temperature, what happens to the band gap? It increase or decrease? Okay, I will tell you. It actually decreases. That means at 0 Kelvin band gap is maximum. Then as you increase the temperature, band gap goes down, means it reduces. So now if you increase the temperature, band gap is reduced. It is easier to pull away the electron or difficult? It is easier, right? So that means the voltage required for breakdown is reduced, right? So as you increase the temperature, the breakdown voltage decreases, right? So they have negative temperature coefficient. So that is the way to find out whether this breakdown is avalanche breakdown or Zener breakdown. Avalanche breakdown has positive temperature coefficient. Zener breakdown has negative temperature coefficient. Okay, when I'm saying the voltage is increasing or decreasing, it means the magnitude of the voltage. Because sometimes we say, this is basically negative voltage, right? So don't confuse. It's a magnitude of the breakdown voltage. Okay, let us come back.
सर एक बार
yeah.
ये फिर से बताएंगे टेम्परेचर कोएफिशिएंट से कैसे डिफरेंशिएट कर रहे हैं?
No, band gap decreases with temperature. You can recall that the band structure slides where we showed that how these the bottom of these valleys, gamma valley, X valley, were changing with temperature. That is basically the band gap, right?
Yes.
So band gap actually decreases as temperature increases. And you can also think like this, as temperature increases, it is easier to for electron to move away from the bonding. They are relatively more free, and crystal has more vibrations.
तो मतलब टेम्परेचर ज़्यादा तो एवलांच ब्रेकडाउन होगा, टेम्परेचर के साथ अगर इंक्रीज हो रहा है तो एवलांच
Yes, temperature break if the breakdown voltage is increasing with temperature, it is avalanche. Okay, so what point I was telling you here, so for avalanche breakdown, now breakdown voltage depends on, let's say this is high doped P plus, this is N region. So now this avalanche breakdown depends on which doping, P plus doping or N doping. This we discussed in last class only, right? It depends on the N doping, the smaller doped side, right? It's inversely proportional, right? 1 by ND. So if you increase this doping, what will happen to the breakdown voltage? It will reduce, right? So if you want high breakdown voltage, you will have to reduce the doping. But if you reduce the doping, what will happen? The resistance will increase, right? And resistance will increase, then what will happen? The heating will be more, right? So that will of course be an issue, right? But that heating will spoil the device. You understand? It is not the avalanche. It is the heating due to the high current that spoils the device. So it is not the avalanche breakdown itself which causes the device to malfunction. It is rather a technique that is used in certain cases. For example, in some detectors, photo detectors, if there are few number of photons are coming, so what we do, we have this avalanche multiplication tube that multiplies these carriers, because these small number of photons will generate a small number of carriers, and they are multiplied by avalanche, and then they are counted basically. So this avalanche multiplication is used for this kind of purpose. And of course, voltage regulation is one application where these breakdown diodes are used. But the main culprit which causes the device to malfunction or to spoil the device is the heating due to the current. So that means if you want high breakdown voltage, you have to reduce the doping, and if you reduce the doping, your resistance will increase, heating will increase, right? So if your heating is increasing, what will you do now? What other parameter? You can make it, large area, a smaller length, right, to reduce the resistance. See, once you know the conductivity, you can, because this doping will decide the conductivity, then resistance is rho L by A, right? So you can increase the area and reduce the length. But if you reduce the length, there is a phenomena called punch through. In punch through, what happens? The depletion region is extending to the contact, right? So whole region is covered, right? So once depletion region extend to the contact, then without breakdown also current will flow, large current will flow, right? Because now these carriers can directly follow the field and come here. So that means when we design these diodes, there is a lot of physical layout considerations are there. So the purpose of this discussion is just to show you that there are physical constraints in designing these diodes, and these constraints you should know. Okay, so this discussion partly summarized in this slide. Okay, we have discussed it. Then let us begin our discussion on the small signal equivalent circuits. Now, generally, so far what we have seen, when we discuss diode, we say it has a dynamic resistance, right? Which is 1 by R dynamic is di by dV. And of course, di by dV you can differentiate I. I is equal to Is exponential QB by KT. So what you get basically, this R dynamic, this is R dynamic, is Vt over I dc, right? Vt is KT by Q, which is 26 millivolt at room temperature. Now this is function of the DC current, right? So as you are increasing the current, the dynamic resistance is reducing, right? So here it is maximum, it is less. If you go further, it will be even less. So this all of us probably know. And then if you see a simple circuit, right, you can measure the voltage here, right? Then for a small signal, what will happen? V supply is a constant. So for a small signal, here there is no change. So here small signal is 0, so this will be grounded. So what you will have, and this can be considered as short circuit at sufficiently mid-range frequency. So you will just have a diode, right? The diode usually represented as this dynamic resistance times of VBI, right? Now VBI is not going to change with V in, the change is basically very small, right? So you can probably ignore it. So it will just be simple voltage divider, and that is for a small signal, not for the total voltage. So this kind of circuit you have used, right, in your basic electronics, right? Where this in forward bias, this diode is represented by a 0.7 voltage and a series resistance, and in reverse bias, because no current is flowing, it is usually represented by a capacitor, right? Now in this course, we will go in more depth. So let us begin our discussion on reverse bias junction, right? Now in reverse bias junction, what happens? This is your PN junction. There is a charge here, right? And this certain voltage is applied. Now if you increase this voltage by small delta V, what will happen? Some extra charge will be added here. Some extra charge will be added here. And that will determine the capacitance, right? So your capacitance will be Q by dV. Or you can also say, because charge is added at this width W, so you can say the added charge divided by W, right? So that will be the capacitance. Now this resistance is usually pretty large, right, in reverse bias. So this is goes to infinity basically. So in reverse bias you just have this capacitance, right? Now this capacitance is due to the depletion charge, right? So we call this one as depletion capacitance. What will happen in forward bias? If you recall the forward bias, now this depletion region is reduced, right? And you have this magnetic carriers are injected here. So you have two types of charge, depletion charge and you have this magnetic carrier charge. So when you increase the voltage, let's say your V becomes V plus delta V, then this charge will increase, this charge will increase, and this depletion rate will reduce, right? So let me use different color. So this depletion charge is gone. If you increase the voltage, and this charge is increased. So this change in charge is basically will create a depletion capacitance CD, and this charge will create another capacitance called diffusion capacitance, right? This is due to the diffused carriers, right? And of course you have RD here for forward bias, correct? So let's go in detail now. Now in reverse bias, what is the conductance? This current is constant, so di by dv is 0. That means 1 by R is 0. That means R is infinite, right? Of course, it has some dependence square root of V, but that is very small. So that means you can consider R to be very large. It is not infinite, but it is very large, and that is called leakage current. So if very large, we can say it's almost infinite, or 1 over R is a conductance which is near to the 0. So for reverse bias, here R is reverse bias. Similarly, the capacitance, you can define junction capacitance as Cj is dq by dv, and of course you can differentiate the expression for Q, or you can just write what charge is added at the edge of this depletion region. Yes, you want to say something? No question? Okay, let's continue. Because charge is added at the two sides of the depletion region. So you can say that charge added divided by the width, right? So so you can write epsilon A by D, right? The D is basically the width of the depletion region. So you can directly write or you can differentiate. You will get the same expression using both the methods. And of course, the expression for W is, if you substitute here, expression for the depletion width. So that basically Na plus Nd by Na Nd to VBI. This is VBI, right? Okay, this is basically VBI plus V reverse bias, right? Actually, general expression is VBI minus V applied, right? But in reverse bias, V applied is negative, right? So you can say plus VR here, right? Please take care of sign, right? In reverse bias, this becomes positive. They add up basically. So whether you use the expression VBI minus VA or VBI plus VR, they are same basically. Because in reverse bias, V applied is negative. So this total voltage is VJ. and by Q epsilon. Now, if you notice here, this capacitance depends on, of course, the doping and the bias, right? So this capacitance reduces as 1 by square root of voltage, right? So that means if you do the square, it is proportional to 1 over V. And if you plot it, you can actually get the built-in potential from CV measurement. So this is actually one technique you will do in one of your courses. You will do CV measurement, and from that you will estimate the built-in potential. And you can also estimate the doping also in certain cases. For example, for one-sided junction, let's say ND is much larger than NA, right? So this expression will, you can write ND by ND plus NA will be ND because ND is much large. So it will become basically proportional to NA. So your capacitance will be proportional to the doping on the lower doped side. This is for lower doped side. Did you notice even for avalanche breakdown, it was the breakdown voltage was dependent on the doping of the lower doped side, and it was inversely proportional. Here it is directly proportional to the square root of the doping on the lower doped side, right? So if you rewrite this expression for one-sided junction, what do you get? C square is A Q epsilon some A square Q epsilon N by 2 V, right? So if you plot C versus 1 by V, right? Now V is equal to VBI plus VG, right? So you can take out these two and simplify like this here. If you do Cj square, right? It is V applied. So for reverse bias, V applied is negative. So if you do 1 by C square, it becomes VBA minus VA. Now if you plot 1 by Cj square versus VA, right? Now this will go to 0 when VBA equal to VA, right? So when VA equal to VI, so this is VA, it will cross at VBI. Of course, at VBI it is not reverse bias, right? So it is basically the extrapolation of this line. In reality, it is not actually that straight. In fact, there is a dependence. It is not that straight because the as we saw that there is certain changes. If you go for higher voltage, there is some leakage current is there, right? And the current depends on square root of V. So not same amount of charge is added. So capacitance is basically it's slightly changing. Right? Actually, it may be turn out to be something like this. Right? It's not exactly straight. But what you can do, you can assume it is straight somewhere near this region and then extrapolate it to VBI. So you will get certain range here. So it will be fairly close to the built-in voltage. So, but with the measurement error, you will get almost a straight line. And so this intercept will give you the built-in potential, right? Now, if you see, if you differentiate 1 by Cj square by dV, what you will get? You will get this coefficient 2 by Q NVK, right? Or epsilon, right? So this slope is inversely proportional to the doping. Those other things are constant, right? So from the slope, you can get the doping concentration. So intercept and slope will give you the built-in potential and the doping. Now this doping will be of the lower doped side. Now this is only for one-sided junction. When both sided junctions are there, then you cannot get individual doping. Let's say if dopings are equal, then you can say, this is the doping. So if you know the exact relationship, you can estimate the doping. But for one-sided, you can directly get the doping and built-in potential from this 1 by C square versus voltage curve. So when we combine both the conductance and the capacitance, we have the equivalent circuit for diode. So this is your resistance Now this is the series resistance, right? Then this conductance is 0, right? So it's almost open. The series resistance, of course, appears from the quasi-neutral region or region away from the depletion, right? So this is due to the depletion region. These two are due to the depletion region. And this is the quasi-neutral region. Now, if you notice here, usually the reverse bias circuit parameters, they do not depend on frequency. So more or less constant, right? Why is that? Because these are majority carrier devices, right? See, you have this PN junction here, positive charge here, negative charge here, right? So when you apply a bias, what happens? Space charge is increased here, and these electrons are moved away. Space charge is increased here, holes are moved away. Now these are majority carriers, and they can respond very fast. They can respond very fast, order of few picosecond. So that means unless the frequency is 1 over order of picosecond, they will basically respond quite fast. If frequency is more than this 1 over picosecond, order of terahertz, then of course they will again depend on frequency. But as far as our labs are concerned, we go to a few kilohertz, megahertz, right? It won't depend on frequency. So this is the equivalent circuit for reverse bias. Is it okay? And if you want to estimate what is this typical response time, you can do that by solving the quantity equation. For example, a sample is shown here. Plus you consider n side, right? So dn by dt is dj by dx plus generation recombination, right? And if we neglect it, what we have now, of course, we can also say it is only the drift thing. So j can be written as sigma e, and then dj by dx becomes sigma d by dx. So this becomes sigma d by dx. Now d by dx you can approximate from the charge here. So the charge that is moved here is basically your n. So now these are the movable charge only, right? Other charges are not moving, right? So we will only include the moving charge here. So it becomes q times n, the majority carrier concentration. For our whole side, of course, it will be p. So from this you can these two equations, you can estimate dn by dt, and that comes out to be around minus n. Now q will cancel by if you see here sigma is there, right, and epsilon is there, right? So it is basically epsilon by sigma, right? And this epsilon by sigma is basically your it has a name. It's called dielectric relaxation time, and it comes out to be if you calculate for silicon for typical doping, it comes out to around 5 picosecond. So it's order of picosecond, right? So that means majority carrier respond very fast. Now you can compare this with the minority carrier lifetime, which runs into order of few tens microsecond, right? So of course, if device parameter depends on minority carrier, it will depend on frequency. If the device parameter depends on majority carriers, it will be more or less independent of frequency, up to few tens of megahertz. Once you go to gigahertz, terahertz, it may again depend on frequency. So that completes discussion on reverse bias PN junction parameters. Let's take a short 5 minutes break. Then we will discuss device parameters of forward bias junction. I'm stopping the recording. If you have any question, you can ask me. So let's continue. In case of forward, depletion region is very narrow, right? Depletion region is very narrow, right? So your depletion capacitance, you can ignore it. It's very small, right? In case of diffusion part, lot of carriers are diffusing, right? Both to the N side and P side. Now, if you notice here, if you increase the voltage from V to V plus delta V, so where the carriers are added, unlike depletion region where carriers are added at the end, right? Here carriers are not added at the end. Here carriers are increased everywhere, right? And mostly added near this region, right? So for delta V, this will be the change in carriers. This is the extra. So this will be your delta Q for delta V. Correct? So due to this delta V extra voltage, this is the extra charge between these two curves, right? So this peak will change, delta N exponential QV by KT, and of course it will go to 0 at infinity. The delta N will go to 0 here. So let us try to draw the expression for it. So delta N can be known as Ni square by Na, which is basically the magnetic carrier concentration. So this is P type, so it is NP naught exponential QV by KT. Now V is, you can write total voltage, right? So what we do basically, we choose a DC operating point. This is VDC, and this is basically VAC, right? Or you can say this is V plus delta V, where delta V is AC part. Because the voltage is not changing from plus V to minus V, it is changing, a small voltage is there superimposed on DC voltage V. So total charge here will be delta N, of course will change with position. So your delta N, you can say, will be delta N will be delta N at XP e to the power minus X by L, right? So if you integrate it, this L will be multiplied. So delta N at XP multiplied by Ln. This will be the total charge. You can recall other expression. We said that I is Q by tau. So you can write Q as I tau. So this I will be, because this is tau N. So this will be I due to N only, right? And L is square root of d tau. So tau N can also be written as L square by d. Similarly, you can write for electrons also, holes also you can write. For holes it will be I LP square by dP, and it will be IP times tau P. But you can write simply I tau N when it is one-sided junction. So where N side is highly doped, then you can say that I is mostly IN, so you can write I times tau N. Correct? Or a general expression would be Q will be IN tau N plus IP tau P. And this can be written as I total times tau effective. So I become IN plus IP, and tau becomes IN tau N plus IP tau P by IN plus IP. Right? So that way you can write. And then if you take the capacitance, it will be dq by dv. So it will be d by dv of I tau. Now, if you take the derivative here with respect to v, that will give you the derivative with respect to total charge. So this will basically, if you derivative with respect to v, your q by kt will come out, and you can ignore one here for clearly in forward bias region. So this will be multiplied by q by kt, right? So it will be q by kt times the capital Q, right? Now we are not changing the voltage from plus V to minus V. We are only changing it small, right? So instead of writing total Q, we can write the Q for this region. So that we call a small variation in Q, delta I tau N, and that will be your capacitance, right? Now I gave you one homework also, where I told you that if the length of this region is W, and it is comparable to the diffusion length or smaller, right? What will happen? It's much smaller than the diffusion length. What will happen? Your slope will be delta n by W, right? So the charge will be half delta n at xp times W instead of L, right? So if you look here, if you compare these two, this W by 2 is appearing instead of L. So here instead of L square by D, we will have W square by 2D, because they have to cross this length W, right? So you have to multiply by W. So this is called transit time. So in first case, when the length is large enough, these carriers are actually recombining, right? So in this region they are recombining. So a recombination they are disappearing. So this is called long base, and your capacitance is Q by KT times delta I tau. In case of short base, instead of I tau, you can write I times W square by 2D, where W is the width, and it is much shorter than the diffusion length. And we will again discuss it when we discuss BJT. This is basically called transit time. So the time it takes for the moiety carrier to cross over the base region. So for short base, the expression for capacitance changes like this. Now if you notice here, for different frequency, the response will be slightly different, because these moiety carrier, they are slower to respond. So let's say if some carriers are responding slowly, so if your frequency is low, these carriers will have enough time to respond, so not an issue. But if your frequency is higher, now these carriers cannot respond so fast. So in that case, the parameters will basically be dependent on the frequency. Unlike the majority carriers or reverse bias, where these carriers could respond very fast. So parameters were sort of independent of the frequency. In forward bias, they are dependent on frequency. So if you want to estimate the moiety carrier lifetime, you can refer to the TREP model, the SRH Shockley-Riedel recombination model, where we said that due to the TREP level, the carrier lifetime is 1 over NT. There is a NT is a TREP concentration. Sigma T is the cross section, the capture cross section of the TREP, and Vt is the thermal velocity. And from that, if you put the values, it comes out around 300 microsecond. So that is, if frequency is more than 1 over tau, then these carriers cannot respond with the voltage, right? So they will go out of phase, and that will lead to frequency dependent parameters. Let us look back at the moiety carrier diffusion equation for AC signal. Now, if you write this moiety carrier diffusion equation, now since for high frequency, if you consider high frequency, this carrier cannot respond with the frequency. So dN by dt can be written as j omega times delta n. And if you take it to the other side, this becomes minus delta n by tau minus j omega times delta n. And if you combine these two, you get basically 1 plus j omega tau by tau. So 1 over tau is basically replaced by a factor 1 plus j omega tau by tau. And when you take the square root, so without this omega factor, you have, let's say, G naught, right, times VAC. So G naught is basically the conductance. When these carriers have frequency dependence, you include this factor, right, 1 plus j omega tau square root. And when you take the square root, this is 1 plus j omega tau. You can write a to the e to the j theta. Then if you take the square root, it becomes square root of a e to the j theta by 2. So real part becomes cos theta by 2. Imaginary part becomes sin theta by 2. And this can be written as 1 minus cos theta. Cos theta by 2 can be 1 plus cos theta. And cos theta you can estimate as square root of 1 plus square root 1 plus omega square tau square. And when you substitute, you get some expression like this, right? And if you notice here, real part is the conductance, imaginary part is the capacitance j omega. Or so if you substitute here for omega equal to 0, right? For DC, what will happen? It will be G naught, right? For omega equal to 0, this will be same as G naught, and this will be almost 0, right? 1 minus 1, 0. For high frequency, you can ignore 1, so it will be omega tau. So for high frequency, it will be G naught omega tau by root 2. And for this one, it will again be omega tau. So G naught by root 2 omega tau, right? So they will go to, now this is basically omega CD, right? So if you write CD here, then you divide by omega, right? So now this is square root, right? Square root. This is square root. So if you do here, then C will depend as 1 over square root of omega, and conductance will be proportional to the square root of omega. So as frequency increases, conductance will increase and capacitance will decrease, right? So you can write a simple code here to plot the two curve. So your G is basically increasing with frequency and C is decreasing as a square root, right? And that's gives basically your parameter dependence on the frequency. So this is a plot basically, and at high frequency we call this p-n junction as leaky because its conductance goes up. So its conductance goes up. So let's summarize. And so the typical equivalent circuit of p-n junction diode is a conductance here, a junction capacitance here, a diffusion capacitance here, and a series resistance. So in reverse bias, only Cj and the series resistance appear. In forward bias, the diffusion capacitance and the conductance dominate. So for reverse bias, you can say just like a DC capacitance, right? And in forward bias, it is a frequency dependent diffusion capacitance and a diffusion conductance. Okay, with this we are closing this lecture. Thank you very much. In tomorrow's class, we will discuss about the transient response. So if you have any question, I will take it up now. Otherwise, we are closing it. So last class we discussed how to calculate different parameters, the equivalent circuit of p-n junction diode, the capacitance, the junction capacitance, diffusion capacitance, then conductance, and what are their typical ranges in forward bias and reverse bias. Now in today's class, we are going to discuss transient response. Now transient is how the transient is different from AC response, right? A small signal and transient. What is the difference? A small signal is basically you are operating at certain DC value, then your signal is varying by few tens or few hundred millivolt, right? So it's a basically small signal, right? So around the DC point, your signal is varying. That is a small signal. Now transient is usually a large change from positive to negative, right? Like that. And this is usually used in basically you have those where you consider different state, right? The on state, the off state is like a logic function basically, right? So the voltage range can be larger. So if you think of PN junction as a switch, then it is on around VBI, right? Or sometimes written as V gamma, the turn voltage, and off at a negative voltage, right? May not be very large, but a decent negative voltage. And if you consider them, when it is forward bias, injected carriers are quite large. And you have a curve like this. This is a minority carrier concentration. Similarly, on the other side, in case of reverse bias, there is carrier extraction. So this curve goes down, right? So when you turn from on to off, this amount of charge has to be removed. And similarly, when you turn from off to on, this much charge has to be injected. So that means a diode will not immediately turn on or turn off. It will take some time because charge cannot be instantaneously removed. You have seen this phenomena in simple RLC circuit also, right? If you remember, across the capacitor, the voltage cannot be changed instantaneously, right? And voltage is Q over C. That means charge cannot be changed instantaneously. In case of inductor, the current cannot be changed instantaneously, right? So this diode is basically acting like a capacitor. So we will analyze both of them. So let's begin with turn off transient. So if you see the circuit here, initial voltage is actually it's basically state, right? So it's any negative voltage. It's logic 0, right? It's a logic 0. It's not actually 0 volts, and this is logic 1. So around V gamma, and this is some negative voltage. So you are turning from 1 to 0. So this edge you are considering. So when it is 1 or it is forward bias, current is flowing, and you are operating somewhere here, I versus V. And when you turn it off, you go to reverse bias, right? So there are two things. First, you basically remove the charge due to the forward bias. Then you do the carrier extraction for the. So if you see the curve like this, first you remove this charge. It has achieved the normal state. Then you inject, evacuate those charges. So from when you move from forward bias to reverse bias, now what will happen? The voltage across diode will not change instantaneously, right? So it will, as the charge is moved away, it will go down. And when the voltage across diode is 0, that is means your the XX minority carrier has been removed. Then after that, this VA will go to negative value, right? The applied negative value. That is basically your you are recovering the charges, right? So these two regions are divided as, this is basically your storage time. So the stored charge is removed during this time, and this is your recovery time, right? Recovery time. So during this, the minority charge is recovered from the from each side basically. So total will give you the time for turn of transient, and it has a name. It's called reverse recovery time. Similarly, for forward, of course, you have to fill in both the carriers, right? Both these regions basically with same carriers. Now, if you carefully look at the charge curve of the charge, so this is a multi-carrier concertation, and in forward bias, we applied the concertation, the peak values NP0 exponential QV by KT. This is of course assuming that we applied false across the junction only. So if you want to be more accurate, you can write V across diode or junction, right? VD or V junction, right? Whatever. Now, what happens? Now you suddenly change the applied voltage to negative, right? When it was forward bias, current was flowing. So this is delta P. This is delta N. So these holes were coming from here. Electrons were coming here. So overall current flow was in right to left direction. And this was positive, right? Wait, this is minority, right? So it's N type. And this is P type, right? So it was positive, right? So current was flowing from right to left. Okay, now if you change this voltage, let's do it reverse bias. Now what will happen? The holes will move to right, electrons will move to left. So the direction of current flow will be reversed, right? And of course this charge will reduce. Now you notice the direction of flow. So these carriers have to flow to opposite side, right? So that means their slope should change, right? So you see, notice here the slope is changing, right? So that they can flow in this direction. Now what is the purpose of this slope here? Because still recombination is going on. So there are two mechanisms that are taking away the carriers, right? One is recombination, another is extraction of the carrier, right? Similarly, extraction and recombination. So these two mechanisms are taking place, and when they go to zero, basically the delta N and delta P, they go to zero. That is the basically time taken for the that is called storage time. The time taken for the concertation to reach reach to their equivalent magnetic carrier concertation, that is storage time. So it basically is not always exponential here. The slope actually changes because these carriers are now extracted instead of injected. So their slope has changed. Is it okay? Now, after it reaches to zero, then during negative time, during a negative voltage, these carriers are further extracted, right? So initially we had concertation like this, then it changes like this, it changes like this, it changes like this, changes like this, and then so up to here storage time, and this is a recovery time. And similarly on N side and P side, both side actually happens same thing. Now, how much time it will take the carriers to move out? Carrier thermal velocities are 10⁻⁷ centimeter per second, right? That we have already calculated, right? 3 kT by am, right? Square root. And then diffusion length is order of few tens of micrometer. In silicon, you can assume as less as 50 micrometer. So time taken to reclaim these carriers, see, they are extending up to diffusion length only, right? So the carrier here, they can be easily removed. These will take time, right? So overall time will be, maximum time will be the diffusion length divided by the velocity, and that comes to around 10⁻⁻10 second, right? So these carriers can be removed very quickly, within a fraction of nanosecond. But in real life, this does not happen, right? Because if you are going to remove a small amount of charge in 10⁻⁻10 second, a very high current will flow, right? But circuit has some resistance, all those things, right? We have current limiting resistor. So circuit does not allow, right? So circuit allows only V applied by R external. That is a maximum current that can flow through the circuit. So this extraction of charge is actually limited by the circuit current. So that factor will appear when you calculate the reverse recovery time. For example, you see here, let's say in forward bias, RF is a resistance, so maximum current will be VF by RF, right? Assuming VF is large compared to the 0.7 or the diode cut-in voltage, and similarly, the reverse bias current will be VR by RR, right? Okay, this will be the maximum current, by the way, because see in reverse bias, of course, current will be limited by the diode, but during the transient, it has only lot of charge, right? So it can reach its peak value VRR by RR, right? So in forward bias, the peak value is VF by RF. In reverse bias, peak value is VR by RR. In forward bias, current is limited by the RF. In reverse bias, current is limited by the diode. But during the transient, current is limited by this resistor. Because see, in reverse bias, what we are doing, we are trying to extract the carriers. So because it was forward bias, so a lot of charge was there. So lot of charge was available. So diode was not limiting. Rather, the ability of the circuit to draw the current was a limiting factor. So in forward bias, you have I have forward current here, and then you suddenly switch it. The direction of the current will change. You switch here, direction of current will change. It will, because it has a lot of charge, and now the voltage is also not instantaneously changing, right? There will be some instantaneous change. You will see in coming slide, because the direction of current is reversed, right? So if there is a series resistance here, very small. So due to change in the direction of current, the voltage of drop across this RS will be the sudden change, right? So this is a storage time, and this is a reverse recovery time, right? Now, please note the definition of this reverse recovery time is basically from the peak current to 10% of the current. Now, this 10% of current is not necessarily the reverse saturation current. Reverse recovery time is defined as time required for current to change from IR to 0.1 IR, the 90% drop in the current. Okay. So, and during this storage time, as we discussed earlier, two things are happening, right? Charge is extracted and charge is recombining, right? So maybe we can write down some kind of equation, right? So let's consider one-sided junction, P plus N junction, right? So in this case, mostly the current will come from injected holes, right? And injected electrons will have very less contribution. So that mostly charge is stored here, and that charge has to be extracted. So this picture shows clearly, right, how the concentration is changing. So because this is extracted here, so the slope is negative here, and here it is recombining basically. And I is current is UA dp by dx, right, with a minus sign, right? So dp by dx you can write I by QA dp. So if I will change, then the dp by dx will change with I. Now, if you want to write the equation for this charge, so what is the rate of change of this charge? dq by dt is charge supplied. So in forward wise, the current is flowing in, it is supplying the charge, minus recombination. Recombination is Q by tau, right? This is QP. So Q by tau. Now in reverse bias, this charge is, instead of supplied, is extracted, right? So you can write IR with a minus sign because charge is extracted, minus Q by tau. And when you solve this equation, you get expression like this. How? Let's say at t equal to 0. What is the charge? I forward times tau. You can recall that IF was defined as Q by tau, right? Using charge control model. So you can write Q as IF times tau. So this is the charge at t equal to 0. At t equal to the end of the storage time, Ts, Q will be 0 because charge has been extracted. With these two conditions, if you integrate it, you will get this expression. I think I've shown it, maybe coming slide you will see this. So what you can say, that storage time is basically recombination lifetime times a circuit factor. Why circuit factor? Because IF and IR, they depend on the circuit. Now, if you are using the same resistance, the RF and RR are same. If these RF and RR are same, then it will just be log 2, right? Because both will be equal. So log 2 times tau p. Okay, now let's do some exercise. Now, how the turn-off transient would respond if you increase the IF, right? So IR, you are not changing. IF is increased, right? So that means you have this current here, right? So how the turn-off transient will change? What will happen to TS? It will increase or decrease? Come on, any response? See, I is more. That means Q is IF times tau. So that means charge is more. And this current is constant. So that means with constant current, it will take more time to remove the charge. So your tau s will be increased. And what about this recovery? It will follow the same trend, right? Okay, if you increase the IR, so this Q is IF times tau. Charge is same. Now current is more, right? So of course, the charge will be removed quickly. So your tau s will reduce. If you decrease the tau p, what will happen? So current, both the currents are same, charge is same. So tau s will be same. Or it will be different. We are only changing the tau p. What will happen to tau s if you decrease the tau p? You recall the expression here? tau s is dependent on tau p, right? So if tau p is decreased, tau s will be decreased. Why? Because during this storage time, not only the carriers are extracted, they are recombining also, right? So the carrier extraction is proceeding at the same rate, but now recombination is faster, right? So within this time, more carriers would have recombined, so it will be slightly reduced. So tau s will be slightly reduced. What about this recovery time? So overall, this time will be reduced. So maybe I can show you here. Next slide. Okay. So this is how this will look. Okay. Now in terms of transient, let's solve that equation. dq by dt is equal to minus IR minus QP by tau. So if you take to one side, then you have I dt on one side and dq by, let's see the equation. Okay, dq by dt is minus IR minus QP by tau, right? So you can have dq is basically, right, dq by dt is written as minus IR plus IR tau plus QP by tau p. So dt by tau p and dq by IR tau plus QP, right? So that's what you should get. Okay. So either you keep the tau here or you can keep tau here. Both are basically same. So this is basically dq by 1 plus q something, right? It will be log, right? So log of IR plus QP by tau, and you are integrating from QP0 to QPT, and this is T. So IR plus at this minus sign here. So if you absorb this one, then initial by final. Now final, this is 0. Initial is IF tau p. So you will have basically IR plus IF by IR, right? So this will be IR plus IF by IR. So 1 plus IF by IR you will get, right? So 1 plus IF by IR you will get. So that will be the factor for your storage time. So let's conclude this one. So diode switching time is basically recombination time multiplied by the circuit factor. Now you can extract the carriers, right, faster by increasing IR. But in the typical circuit, you see the forward current is much larger than the reverse current. So to turn it off quickly, what we can do, we can increase the tau p, right? And how we can increase tau p? We can inject deep traps, right? Because it depends on trap levels, right? So how can you introduce trap? By for silicon, gold acts as a trap, right? So you can dope it with gold by adding these traps, and that will allow the p-n junction to switch faster. But if you recall the reverse saturation current expression, it is 1 by tau, right? So if you decrease the tau, this reverse saturation current will increase. So that means there will be a lot of leakage, and power consumption will also increase. So now let us see the turn on transient. Turn on transient is fairly simple, because here you have to basically supply the carriers, right? So you basically change from reverse bias to forward bias, right? and because the current is the forward current is more or less constant, so the slope also remains constant and the charge keeps increasing till it reaches the steady state. So let us see this kind of final slide. Let's say this is the input voltage, right? So this is a forward, this is a reverse, right? What about the diode current? So here basically we are seeing two transients, right? Turn off transient and turn on. So this is off transient, this is on transient, right? Turn off transient, turn on transient. During turn off, diode will basically conduct the maximum current in reverse bias, VR by R, till the storage time, right? So that is the storage time. Right? Then recovery time, reverse recovery time, and then it has a steady state, right? Now you might wonder, when you did this experiment in your basic electronics lab, you did not see this kind of transient, right? Because these are actually quite fast, you know. And in your lab, the experiment you did maybe up to few kilohertz like that, right? So unless you go to few hundreds of megahertz, you will not see. But in your lab you cannot go, right? Because the transient will appear at high frequency. They will not appear at lower frequencies. So that's why you don't see them in your lab. But if you operate at few hundreds of megahertz, you can basically observe them. Then during the turn on, the diode current from reverse saturation current to forward current, it directly changes. And same thing follows for other. What about the diode voltage? The voltage across diode is V initially. Now when you change the applied voltage, the current changes from IF to minus IR. So if you see this diode, it has a capacitor, a junction capacitor which has charge, and a series resistance, right? So voltage across the series resistance, the drop was IF times RS, right, in one direction. Now when you change the voltage, now the drop is IR times RS in other direction, right? So overall changes basically the sum, or basically you can say difference, you know, if you take care of sign, the sum of basically these two drops, right? IFRS and IRRS, right? So if you take care of sign, then you can write the sudden drop in voltage is basically RS times IF minus IR. So rest of the voltage across capacitor remains same, it does not change during storage time. And once store charge is removed, then it basically exponentially decays for the recovery time. And similar thing happens at the second cycle also, right? And during the turn on transient, there is no such thing. It quickly basically gets the voltage, because in this case the current was already pretty less, right? So current suddenly increases, and it doesn't require much time to inject the carriers, right? So that's why the turn off transient, of course, scale is little exaggerated, but the turn off transient takes more time than the turn on transient, right? So basically the speed of the PN junction diode is actually limited by the turn off transient, and you can say tau S plus tau R, which is called tau RR, basically determines the maximum speed at which the diode can be operated. So in summary, current flow decays to off value gradually, and voltage across the diode, it also changes gradually, and the turn on time is very short, and maximum frequency is determined by the turn off time. So I think that's okay. With this, we complete our discussion on PN junction diode. Now 20 minutes are there, so I will not introduce a new topic. Next class we are ready basically now to discuss the BJT and MOSFET. So BJT we can straight away discuss. regarding MOSFET, we will need to discuss the metal semiconductor junction. Okay, so that will be another lecture. So with this, I close this lecture here. If you have any question, you can ask me. Let me stop the recording.